wrote this book because there are a lot of misunderstandings about the Chinese economy. So why China has been the fastest growing economy in the world over the past 4 decades. Of course, China growing faster than America or than Europe or Japan is not surprising because China started from a very low income level. So the puzzle is not why China has been able to grow faster than America or than Europe, but how come has China grown so much faster than other developing economies? A lot of explanations about the Chinese economy give credit to China's reform and opening up. Of course, reform and opening up is the precondition for China's takeoff. But then economic reform or marketization is totally not unique to China. That can only explain why China has grown faster than North Korea or Cuba. And that's it. It doesn't help us to understand why China has grown faster than the Philippines, for that matter than Indonesia or any African country. So then people say, oh, China has this export-driven economy. So China takes advantage of its cheap labor and takes advantage of globalization. But then all developing countries have cheap labor. Globalization, by definition, is global. And then, of course, then people think about China's big population, so-called the demographic dividend. Of course, economists know a long time ago, a country's economic growth has nothing to do with a country's size or population. Then people, of course, would naturally think of some political reasons for China's growth. Out of 150 developing countries, there's no reason why China has somehow had a more effective government or better economic policies. So what is the reason? To get to the essence of the issue, so we first have to understand what drives the economy to grow. So growth has to come from only 3 factors. First, investment. Second, education, the accumulation of human capital. And third, technological progress. That is basic economic theory of growth. Now, if you look at all these 3 areas, so China has the highest investment rate in the world. So China invests over the past 40 decades about 40% of its GDP. The world's average is 25%. Now, the question, of course, is how come China can invest so much in the economy? Now, of course, investment has to be financed. It's either financed by your domestic savings or by borrowing from other countries. But whether you are a big country or a small country, your investment eventually has to be financed by your own domestic savings. So China just happens to have the highest savings rate among all developing countries, or China has the second highest savings rate, only after Singapore. So China actually saves more than we invest. We actually have some surplus. That's why China has trade surplus. And the second advantage is China's quality of basic education. So in my book, I show that China, of course, has the highest quality of basic education as measured by comparable data, way higher than every other developing countries. And China's education quality is just on par with most developed countries. So when you have people and money, then of course you can learn from other countries, especially Western countries, and to absorb their existing technologies. And then of course economic growth has to depend on technological progress. So China's technological progress has to be the fastest in the whole world. And it's not the theft of IP, or it's not just like export or attracting foreign direct investment. So actually, as a percentage of GDP, China's foreign direct investment into China is not especially high. It's only 2 to 3% GDP a year. That is actually lower than 70 other countries. In the end, my book shows that it's the Chinese Confucian culture of savings and education that has distinguished China from other developing countries. Before China, it was the 4 Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore had grown the fastest between the 1960s and the 1990s. Those were also 4 economies that are heavily influenced by the Confucian culture. Japan is another economy that is influenced by the Confucian culture. But then, of course, if you have good institutions, good policies, you can still grow faster than developed countries. So eventually, you still can catch up. But then to reach a kind of a miracle level of growth, then you need very high savings rate and a very high level of educational quality. Unless if somehow China screws up its economic policies completely in the future decades, then China will continue to grow relatively fast in the next 2 to 3 decades.